What is good, people? We're back again. John chapter 18 now. So let's get into it. Jesus is betrayed and arrested. After saying these things, Jesus crossed the Kidron. We're going with Kidron. Crossed the Kidron Valley with his disciples and entered a grove of olive trees. Judas, the betrayer, knew this place because Jesus had often gone there with his disciples. The leading priests and Pharisees had given Judas a contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards to accompany him. Now, with blazing torches, lanterns, and weapons, they arrived at the olive grove. Jesus fully realized all that was going to happen to him, so he stepped forward to meet them. "Who are you looking for?" he asked. "Jesus, the Nazarene," they said. "I am he," Jesus said. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. As Jesus said, "I am he," they all drew back and fell to the ground. Once more he asked them, "Who are you looking for?" And again they replied, "Jesus the Nazarene." "I told you that I am he," Jesus said. "And since I'm the one you want, let these others go." He did this to fulfill his own statement, "I did not lose a single one of those you have given me." Then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. But Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back in its sheath. Shall I not drink from the cup of suffering the Father has given me?" Then we move on to Jesus at the high priest's house. So the soldiers, their commanding officer, and the temple guards arrested Jesus and tied him up. First, they took him to Ananas, Annas. We're going with Annas because why not? Since he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, a lot of weird names in biblical times. We're going with Caiaphas. No, we're going with Caiaphas. The high priest at the time, Caiaphas, was the one who had told the other Jewish leaders, "It's better that one man should die for the people." Now we move on to Peter's first denial. Simon Peter followed Jesus, as did another one of the disciples. That other disciple was acquainted with the high priest, so he was allowed to enter the high priest's courtyard with Jesus. Peter had to stay outside the gate. Then the disciple who knew the high priest spoke to the woman watching at the gate, and she let Peter in. The woman asked Peter, "You're not one of that man's disciples, are you?" "No," he said, I'm not." Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards had made a charcoal fire. They stood around it, warming themselves, and Peter stood with them, warming himself. Now we move on to the high priest questions Jesus. Inside, the high priest began asking Jesus about his followers and what he had been teaching them. Jesus replied, "Everyone knows what I teach. I've preached regularly in the synagogues and the temple where the people gather. I've not spoken in secret. Why are you asking me this question? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said." One of the temple guards standing nearby slapped Jesus across the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. Jesus replied, "If I had said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I'm speaking the truth, why are you beating me?" Then Annas bound Jesus and sent him to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now we move on to Peter's second and third denials. Meanwhile, as Simon Peter was standing by the fire warming himself, they asked him again, "You're not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it, saying, "No, I'm not." One of the household slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Didn't I see you out there in the olive grove with Jesus?" Again, Peter denied it, and immediately a rooster crowed. Then we move on to Jesus' trial before Pilate. Jesus' trial before Caiaphas ended in the early hours of the morning. Then he was taken to the headquarters of the Roman governor. His accusers didn't go inside because it would defile them, and they wouldn't be allowed to celebrate the Passover. So Pilate, the governor, went out to them and asked, "What is your charge against this man? We wouldn't have handed him over to you if he weren't a criminal," they reported. "Then take him away and judge him by your own law," Pilate told them. "Only the Romans are permitted to execute someone," the Jewish leaders replied. This fulfilled Jesus' prediction about the way he would die. And Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked him. Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Peter retorted. "Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why? What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world. Pilate said, "So you are a king." Jesus responded, "You say I am a king. Actually, I was born and came into the world to testify the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. Then he went out again to the people and told them, "He's not guilty of any crime. But you have a custom asking me to release one prisoner each year at Passover. Who would you like me to release, this king of the Jews?" But they shouted back, "No, not this man. We want Barabbas." Barabbas was a revolutionary. And that is it for John chapter 18. So let's talk about it. First of all, the first thing I want to talk about is a really interesting choice, shall we say. It says in verse 22, then one of the temple guards standing nearby slapped Jesus across the face and said, "Is that the way you answer to the high priest?" he demanded. Verse 23, Jesus replied, "If I've said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I'm speaking the truth, why are you beating me?" I want to talk about those two verses for multiple different reasons. So let's get into it. Verse 22, we see probably, I guess it's kind of daring, it's kind of bold, but one of probably the dumbest things I think I've ever read in my entire life. Quite frankly, I mean, flat out stupid. Just flat out stupid. First of all, it's kind of dumb to be out here slapping and beating on people in general. That's kind of dumb. I mean, I guess you're in this dynamic where you kind of have power and there's not a whole lot they can do about it. But as we read later, there's a prisoner, who's going to get released. You never know. That guy could get his lick back. But anyways, you're out here and you are physically beating, backhanding, sorry, they said slapping. Let's be real. Slapping Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, across the face. That man could rip you apart atom from atom without blinking, and that's who you want to slap around? That would be, I don't know if any of y'all out there are UFC fans. I personally am. Now, once again, I'm making a comparison to sort of make sense of what the Bible is saying and applying real life terms to it. In no way am I genuinely comparing this person to Jesus Christ, and for very good reason. So in the UFC, there's this guy. His name is John Jones. John Jones is a bad man. There is not a man on planet Earth that John Jones could not beat to shreds. Okay. That's like because you're in this position where he's like handcuffed and whatnot. And, you're like, sorry, once again, not a backhand, forehand, slap, right? You're antagonizing someone and deliberately disrespecting, by the way, someone who has such an extreme amount of power over you that it's almost laughable, right? This is a man who you're standing in front of, and because you think you've got this power over him in the moment, you're going, "Wahoo." I mean, that's a decision. That's a choice. 100% a choice you can make. That is an option. One of the dumbest things anyone has ever done, ever, sure, but it's a choice you can make, right? And also, I want to point out, let's actually back up in this first, because like he said, it's not like this guy was unaware. It's not like he didn't know who Jesus was. In verse 20, it says, "Everyone knows what I teach. I have preached regularly in the synagogues and the temple where the people gather. I've not spoken in secret. Why are you asking me this question? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said." So verse 20 is talking about how the people know. The people know. Like, this guy's not unaware of who Jesus is, and yet he's still out here smacking him around. Why are you so dumb, sir? Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, like, we get it. Stupid guy, right? We get, what are you saying all this to say? What's the point? Some of y'all out there are like this guy, and you're out here and you're trying to smack God around and think that you have this power and you have this control over even the Lord himself, right? Right? And I'm trying to illustrate how stupid you are, just how dumb that line of thinking is. Just because God is not actively trying to destroy your life and everything in it does not mean that he can't. Okay. You could be ripped out of this world in a you like instantaneously if the Lord desired. And yet you think that the extreme disrespect you dish out towards God is just he can't do anything about it. Buddy, he most certainly can and will. Okay? Most certainly can. All right? You mistake mercy for weakness. And I highly encourage you to knock it off before he stops being so merciful. I know so many people who are so disgustingly disrespectful to God. I want to slap them, talking about what can God really do anyways. You want to find out, brother, or you want to keep your mouth shut? I don't know why or how we've gotten to this point in our culture and in our society. We're being just flat out disrespectful to not only Christians, but Christ himself is just seen as like this cool thing that people are doing. That is the God of the universe. You don't want to know what his wrath can do to you, and you should be thanking him for not exacting his wrath upon you. But you want to sit around, you want to slap him around. This is who you're choosing to pick a fight with? Really? Like I said, it's like trying to pick a fight with John Jones. He will rip you in half before you know what's happening. Why are you doing this? Why are you so dumb? Even if you do not believe that Jesus Christ is Lord, on the off chance that he is, you probably don't want to be so blatantly and disgustingly disrespectful to the man to give him an incentive to, harm you. Okay? Someone who is claiming to be God maybe sounds like someone you don't want to mess with. Even if they're wrong, they're clearly got something going on. Okay? But no. So let's be a people who are more respectful of our Lord, because the amount of mercy that he has on your life is extreme. Okay? And you do not want it to go away. Now, let's talk about the other verse here, verse 23. Verse 23 is very important, right? Because verse 23 shows the whole hypocrisy and the giant issue with Jesus Christ being on trial in the first place. I'm going to read it again because we spent all this time talking about verse 22. So I'm going to read it again. It says, Jesus replied, "If I said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I'm speaking the truth, why are you beating me?" Okay. Jesus is saying, if I am wrong, if I'm not God, if I'm not who I claim to be, if I am lying, prove it. Prove it. But if not, then why am I here? Why am I on trial? What am I on trial for? Because the truth is, Jesus Christ was not on trial for claiming to be God. In reality, as we have read, these Pharisees and these religious leaders had more than enough evidence to believe that Jesus Christ was who he claimed to be, and they very well should have. Jesus Christ was on trial for bruising people's egos. Jesus Christ was on trial for asking man to be humble. Jesus Christ was on trial for telling people who thought they had power that their power is a lie. Jesus Christ is on trial for calling people out for their sins and for their hypocrisies. He was on trial for pushing the true message of God. That's what he is on trial for. He's on trial for challenging the world and the people in it to be more Christ-centered, and for explaining to them how far they had fallen. He's on trial for offending people. That's truly what he's on trial for. And still, to this day, everyone who denies God, everyone who denies Christ doesn't deny him because there isn't enough evidence, because as the Bible says, they don't know of his existence. They deny him because his existence offends them. Boy, that really tells me a lot about you if the truth of Jesus Christ is offensive to you. If the truth of a merciful, wonderful, loving God is offensive to you, that says all I need to know about you. It says all I need to know about you. Jesus Christ was on trial because he told some people, you aren't as great as you think you are. Okay. He told other people, you can't just go around and do whatever you want. Truly, if you ask anyone their problem with Christ, it boils down to one of those two things. They either think they're better and think they're greater than they actually are, or they just want to do things that God tells them they're not supposed to be doing. And they don't want to admit that they're wrong for doing it. That is what Jesus is on trial for right there, for calling people out for their sins. And the only reason he's being put to death is because these people would rather kill him than admit that they are wrong. And if you don't think that's true of society today, I think you're unobservant. I think you are. To be honest with you, we live in a world nowadays where the very thought of telling someone that their way of doing things is wrong is like the worst thing anyone has ever heard, right? Just the concept that there is a structure and an order and a way that things should be done and a way that people should conduct themselves, like a preset, predetermined idea of how we as human beings are supposed to behave is horrid to some people. We live in a society that has convinced itself that morality is relative. What? Now, I will say one of the dumbest things that I have ever heard as a genuine argument for why we should excuse the sins of the past when we're talking in history class is because it was acceptable at the time. Now, it's fine to acknowledge that something was acceptable at the time to explain why so many people did it, but it's not fine to act like those people are just no longer subjected and should be no longer subjected to the punishments that should come along with that, and they should be absolved of the horrendous things that they did because I mean, that's just what people did back then. Back then, everyone just married. Every dude in his 30s just married a 14-year-old girl. That's just how society was back then. This is still weird and creepy and disgusting. I don't care that that's what people did back then. That's still nasty. Okay? It's still disgusting. Okay? It's a horrid, horrible thing that should not have happened, and sitting here and acting like it's okay because that's just how the world was back then is not a great thing. It's not a great argument, right? But that's a genuine argument. It's an argument we use nowadays. Oh, that's just how their culture is. Okay, that's why it's fine. That's how their culture is. I was talking to someone and I was like, "Why are you so rude and like hateful towards people?" They're like, "Well, that's just like part of who I am. I'm just rude and nasty and I'm hateful towards people. That's just part of who I am and that's okay." I'm like, "No, it's not okay. Listen, as someone who's been like the guy who's like, I'm just rude and mean to people, it wasn't okay when I did it. You can't just be like, that's just like the way I am and it's okay. No. Your ways are wrong." But that's like the worst thing anyone's ever heard nowadays. It's like the worst thing anyone's ever heard nowadays is that their own ideas of how they're supposed to act is wrong. Even like, I want to talk about behaviorally. The Bible has a very, very set way that it's calling us to behave. It's calling us to be kind and to be loving and to be forgiving and merciful and gracious. Okay. As Jesus Christ was. But it's also calling us to be honest. It's calling us to be sincere. It's calling us to be genuine. And it's calling us, to do all of these things, to be honest, like to tell people truly and honestly what you think and like to call people out when they're doing things that are wrong, to help guide them and move them through life, right? So the Bible has a very set, specific way that it calls us to behave. But yet, when you try to tell people that, they're like, no, I'm not supposed to behave in any specific type of way. I just kind of get to behave however I want. And it just, that's how it is. No, that's not how it is. There are rules that you are supposed to follow. And you're so offended by the idea that there are rules, that there is a way that you're supposed to act, that you're willing to kill a man rather than just admit that you are wrong and that what you're doing is wrong and the way you behave is wrong. So, yeah, that's what Jesus Christ was on trial for, people, because they could not prove that the truth wasn't true. So they just decided to silence him. It's like, oh my gosh, what is the movie called? The Tom Cruise lawyer movie. You can't handle the truth. That's what I'm thinking of. The Jack Nicholson quote. That's the truth. I'm thinking of it because that is the truth of the Pharisees. They couldn't handle the truth. So they decided they were just gonna kill it. And I think we live in a society nowadays that very much, if you can't handle the truth, you just get rid of it. You just get rid of it or you ignore it. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You can't just get rid of the truth. You can't just pretend it didn't happen and it doesn't exist. You can't pretend that you aren't something that you are because you don't like it. Hey, if you don't like something about yourself, why don't you make the necessary changes rather than pretending that you aren't that way? Don't lie to yourself. Improve. I remember actually one time. Okay. Before I say this, I will say I make a lot of jokes towards my brother about being fat. I do it out of love and because it's funny. Okay. And then I remember someone one time being like, why do you always pick on him for being fat? Like, what if he genuinely doesn't like it? I was like, well, if he doesn't like it, then he should just not be fat. I don't know. Go on a diet, buddy. If you don't enjoy being fat, then don't be fat. Make the changes necessary. Now, someone who knows me is going to be like, "Oh, it's easy for you to say. You eat all this food all the time, and you're just naturally skinny." Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I'm appreciative of it because I don't have to worry about that. But there are other things. Like I remember at one point, I was like really just beat down. I have acne. I don't know if y'all can tell. It's kind of hard to see the way the camera's framed with the lighting. I have it set up so that like you can't really see it as well. My skin looks much clearer than it actually is. I have a lot of acne. And then one day I was complaining about it to my sister, and then she just shows up like she's like, "Here's this acne cream. Like you're gonna." I was like, "Well, okay, that's right. If I don't like it, I'll just take the necessary steps. Do what I need to do to not have acne anymore." Fair enough. I feel like that's not like this horrible thing to have to ask of someone. And I feel like we, as the people around them, are horrible for just lying to them and pretending that this issue isn't there. But that's what the world wants us to do nowadays. It wants us to ignore the hard truths, ignore the hard realities, and pretend that the issues that people have just aren't there. That's what these Pharisees wanted to do. They wanted to pretend that their own issues, their own problems weren't there. So when Jesus Christ shows up and was like, whoa, hold on, let's talk about you. Because remember, they were talking about other people and all their problems. So just like, judge not lest ye be judged. Y'all out here and y'all be judging, so let's judge. When Jesus shows up, right, and he starts pointing out their problems and starts calling them out for what they're doing wrong, they're like, no, die. And that has been very true of how our world has functioned ever since. Ever since. Look at it. Historical figures all throughout time call out people in power for the problems with what they do and the problems with who they are, and they die for it. Time, time, and time, and time, and time again. This is the world we live in, people. You you cannot. I mean, it's so ridiculous to me to think. I mean, we live in a world that's so far from God that Jesus Christ is considered to be a controversial figure. Jesus should be the most uncontroversial figure of all time. He should be the baseline for how we feel about everyone else and everything else around us. But instead, he's this polarizing figure that divides the world. Why? Because some people just can't submit. They just can't admit that the way that they do things is wrong. All right. So I've been harping on that fact, on that aspect of it. Now let's talk about the other aspect of it, the egotistical people who believe that they are greater than they are. Boy, was this true of these Pharisees as well. The Pharisees believed that they were the freaking greatest people to ever live. In fact, actually, we read in this passage when he's talking, what does he say as his explanation for why he slapped Jesus? Sorry, I keep trying to go backhand. It's not a backhand, it's a forehand, it's a slap. We got to keep that in mind, keep it biblically accurate. His explanation for why he slapped Jesus, it says, this is quoted from him. Is that the way to answer the high priest? He's saying this is a high priest. This is someone of importance and of status. That is no way to talk to them. These Pharisees and these priests and these religious leaders thought of themselves that they were high and mighty and they were above everyone else. And believe me, no one irritates me more than people who act like that. It's like, you know what? You think you're so great? I'm going to come along. Let's knock you down a few pegs. How about that, buddy? And that is another reason Jesus was put on trial. And that's why Jesus Christ is a controversial figure today, because he does one of the most bold, daring, and out there things anyone could have ever possibly done. Are you ready? Believe me, it's a real shocker. And when I heard it, I was like, I can't believe that Jesus, I mean, that's a lot to ask of these people. Are you ready? Are you ready to hear what it is? Jesus Christ asks human beings to view themselves as less than God. Now, some of you logical people out there, like, that seems like, yeah, like, no duh, human beings are less than God. Like, that's how, yes, yes, correct. You got it. But there are so many people out there that cannot act like it. They can't act like it. They have to be number one, greater than everything else around them. They cannot submit. They can't actually be humble and act as if there is a God who is higher than them. They can't live their life that way. And it's the worst thing in the world that you could ever ask them to do that. Do you know how insane your ego has to be? How inflated your ego has to be? How huge your ego has to be to genuinely believe that it is this horrible thing? And how dare you expect me to put myself beneath the creator of the universe? Like I said, hopefully most of y'all out there realize just how dumb that sounds. That's the way people are living their lives. That is the two reasons why Jesus Christ was hung up on that cross, was because he told people that there is a way to live your life, okay? And you aren't all you think you are. And we couldn't do it. We couldn't listen to him. And he died for it. And on that note, let's pray. Dear Lord, I come to you and I thank you for bringing your son to us, God, so that he may teach us those things. Lord, I pray for all those out there who act as if they are greater than you or even on par with you. Lord, I pray that they would be humbled by any means necessary. God, that they would understand that in comparison to you, they are not even an ant. Lord, I pray for all of those out there who refuse to act as you have called them and to live life as you have called them, that they would understand that their ways are wrong and destructive. Lord, I pray that they would come to you and they would understand how to live according to how you have called, God. And in your name I pray. Amen. Thank you all for your time.